Imagine a motorcycle so long it looked like someone welded two bikes together just to prank the neighbors. Now imagine it carrying 3 or even 4 people, rolling on cast alloy wheels that nobody else dared to try until decades later. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Bohmerland Cechie at home, the world's longest production motorcycle, built when most people were still figuring out how to keep single seat bolted on. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever tried to park a limousine and a motorcycle at the same time? No? Well, someone in 1920s Czechoslovakia thought, why not both? And gave birth to a machine so long, so wild, and so unapologetically strange that even my skeptical barber nodded when I showed him a photo. And this man trims sideburns with a level. Welcome to Timmy Tiny Wheels, where motorcycles get longer, neighbors get weirder, and facts are served with a generous side of laughter. Hit that subscribe button because today's episode has more horsepower, more history, and more cast aluminium than Bob's entire backyard fence collection. Now let's talk about the Cechie Böhmerland. Yes, that's one motorcycle name. And yes, it came in sizes best measured in railcar units. The story begins in the hills of northern Bohemia in 1925 when engineer Albin Hugo Liebisch looked at the potholes around Schönlinde, now Krasna Lipa, and thought, you know what would handle this mess? A motorcycle longer than a canoe. Liebisch, born in 1888 and forged in the fires of pre-war engineering, had worked in Kopřivnice before deciding motorcycles deserved structural ambition, not just chrome and noise. Thus was born the Bohmerland, known domestically as Cechie, built first in a small shop with about 20 employees. Parts came from regional suppliers, ideas came from Liebisch's rather adventurous mind, and courage came in barrels. Production later moved to Kunratis in the early 30s. From the beginning, the bike targeted folks who couldn't afford a car but wanted to bring the entire family, including grandma and maybe a goat, along for the ride. The Cechie lineup ran as Sport, 2-seat, Touren, 3-seat, and the long Langtouren, 4-seat. The later Jubilee update kept a dual seat with an extra perch for a third passenger. The long-frame Bohmerland Langtouren stretched to roughly 3.17 meters overall, about 10 feet, 5 inches, while the wheelbase itself was around 2.23 meters, about 88 inches, still limousine long by motorcycle standards. There was even a military prototype that featured not one but 2 gearboxes, one operated by the rider, the other by a passenger, for a total of 9 speeds. I kid you not, this thing needed a co-pilot like a vintage bomber. Of course, things weren't all smooth trails and picnic runs. The Great Depression didn't do the bike any favors, and production ended in 1939 as the Sudetenland was annexed and war clouds gathered. Still, Liebisch kept dreaming. Even after a nasty traffic accident in 1932 slowed him down, he later tried launching a scooter in the 1950s using Zundap engines, but the post-war world had moved on. Only about 775 Böhmerlands were ever built from 1925 to 1939. Today, we believe around 75 survive, maybe 40 of which are roadworthy. That's about the same number of honest online reviews for diet pills. Let's crack open the hood, or tank in this case, and see what made this banana-shaped beast tick. The main models featured a 600cc air-cooled 4-stroke single-cylinder OHV engine, hand-built by Liebisch himself. The bore and stroke, around 80mm by 120mm. Early versions produced about 16 horsepower, later bumped to 24 horsepower. Modest by today's standards, but not bad for something meant to haul your in-laws uphill on a cobblestone slope. The layout was as unconventional as the man behind it. The engine sat ahead of the rider's knees, the gearbox was typically a British Sturmey Archer 3-speed, and final drive was via chain. The aforementioned 2-gearbox military prototype? That one had a total of 9 forward gears. Proof that sometimes too much ambition doesn't fit into peacetime production. Now let's talk suspension. Up front, a leading link fork with dual coil springs and a friction damper, a setup that made even the most seasoned couch expert scratch his head in admiration. Rear suspension? None. 0. The bike used a rigid frame, which, considering the roads of the time, basically meant your kidneys signed a waiver before each ride. But here's where things get wild. The Böhmerland's wheels, cast alloy, not spoked. That's right, Decades before cast wheels became standard, Liebisch was pouring molten dreams into molds. These wheels were not only sturdy enough for the craters of Bohemia, but became an iconic styling cue for the brand. Brakes were drum style, of course, on both ends. Fuel was stored in two different ways depending on the model, either in a conventional tank mounted above the top tube, the Jubilee, or in dual torpedo-style tanks positioned along the sides of the rear wheel, Langtouren, which gave the bike a silhouette like no other. Some versions even carried a luggage trunk cantilevered off the back, ideal for storing groceries, camping gear, or existential dread. With its 3.17-meter length and 2.23-meter wheelbase, the Langtouren variant still holds the title for the longest production motorcycle. Curb weight? Let's say over 300 kilograms, 660 pounds, and not much less with just one passenger. Yet top speed reached up to 95 kilometers per hour, about 59 miles per hour, and fuel consumption hovered around 4 liters per 100 kilometers, roughly 59 miles per gallon. Not bad for a machine longer than some sheds. And yes, there was a special 1937 model, the Volksmodell, with a 350cc two-stroke engine, built in very small numbers. It was Liebisch's attempt at making a budget-friendly version, but by that time the world was gearing up for war, not leisure riding. What made the Böhmerland unique wasn't just its dimensions, it was its philosophy. This was a machine for people who needed more than speed. They needed utility, range, room. It wasn't about rebellion, leather jackets, or hairpin bends. It was about getting the whole crew to Grandma's house, even if Grandma brought her sewing machine. It offered the seating capacity of a minivan in an era when most motorcycles barely had foot pegs for two. And the colors? Oh, they weren't shy. Red and yellow combos were common, likely aimed at younger buyers or circus performers. And the colors? Oh, they weren't shy. Red and yellow combos were common, probably meant to catch the eye of younger riders or folks who secretly wanted to join the circus. I even remember thinking, if I had one in those colors, I'd need goggles just to look at it in sunlight. There were also green versions for riders who preferred a more respectable look. When it was first sold in the late 1920s and early 1930s, exact prices are a bit foggy. Unlike Jawa or Cechie, Czech Böhmerland didn't have a big dealership network or glossy catalogs. Most bikes were sold directly from the factory, sometimes with receipts, often just with a handshake and a wink. Some sources whisper crown values, but without factory brochures to back them up, quoting them would be like reading a fisherman's small catch story. Tempting, but risky. Fast forward to the collector market and the numbers become clearer and juicier. In 2006, a 1938 Böhmerland 600 anniversary model was auctioned by Gooding & Co. from the Otis Chandler collection for $52,800. Not pocket change for what looks like a bike designed during a fever dream in an artillery factory. Then in 2013, Bonhams sold a 1930 Böhmerland for a cool $60,000 in Las Vegas. Elvis would have approved. In more recent times, restored examples have surfaced with asking prices as high as €82,500 through dealers like Yesterday's in the Netherlands. And Czech sources report a top confirmed sale of 2 million Czech crowns, about €80,000 or $86,000 for a museum-quality restoration. So, what do we have, cycle that seated 3, sometimes 4? One that rocked cast wheels before it was cool. A machine that needed a football field to turn around, another one to park in. Sure, it wasn't fast, sure it was eccentric, but it worked. It did what it was supposed to do, carry people, last forever, and turn every passerby's head, even if some were too polite to ask, what is that and why does it have a trunk? And hey, if your neighbor ever scoffs at your too long, too weird garage project, just show them a picture of this bohemian barge and say, it could be longer.